The Repast Podcast may include detailed discussions about death, the human body after death, and the medical process that may be sensitive or disturbing to some listeners and viewers. Our goal is to educate and inform with respect and care. We encourage listener and viewer discretion, especially for younger audiences or those who may find these topics emotionally challenging.
Saturday is the busiest day for funerals.
Because you can only get to heaven if your funeral is on a Saturday.
Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Brice Green, Director, James H. Cole Home for Funerals. Now, for over 100 years, my family has been in the funeral business, serving Metro Detroit and helping our community when that time comes. I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Antonio Green, as well as my mother, President of James Cole Funeral Home, Karla Cole Green, as well as India Ramsey, Director, James Cole Funeral Home, and one of the valuable assets to our team. Together, myself and my brother have grown up in the funeral business, and we'd like to take you into that right now.
So it was our great-grandfather, James H. Cole Sr., who started the funeral home in 1919 in Detroit's Black Bottom. We're the oldest Black-owned funeral home in Detroit, one of the oldest in the Midwest, and one of the oldest in the state of Michigan. We've been serving the metropolitan Detroit community for over 106 years now, and we continue to do so under the leadership of my mother, supported by myself and my brother.
And I would like to say a special thank you to our mother. Because of her, me and Antonio were able to enter into a thriving business that was already established in the city of Detroit. We were both able to go to mortuary school, join you at the funeral home, and help you keep everything running and keep our family legacy alive and going. And I'd love for you to share and just kind of touch on why you got into the business and why was it that you were even at the funeral home and it was able for myself and Antonio to come down.
Well, I was a daddy's girl. So whatever my father was doing or wherever he was, I wanted to be with him. So it was only natural, on days off from school or whatever, I would go with him to the funeral home and followed him around. And then I decided as I got older that I did want to go into the profession as a licensed funeral director and actually go to mortuary school and get my license. So just the fact that I was a daddy's girl.
I appreciate it. Thank you for telling your story. And like I said, thank you again for doing that. And thank God you were a daddy's girl, because that's why we've been here for over 106 years, because you kept it going and now we're here.
YouTube. Thank God for YouTube in this day of technology, which I am completely ignorant of. If it wasn't for YouTube, I don't know how we would be making it in this day and time.
But you're a fast learner. I'll tell you that much. Any computer program we get, it doesn't take too long for you to get the hang of it. And then you're right there on the keyboard going.
Try hard.
Now, we've reached out to many people in the community to help us understand what questions people have about the funeral industry. It's always one of those things that nobody really understands until you have to do it. And nobody really understands until you are in that seat across the desk and you have to be the one making the arrangements. And we're going to try to help use those questions to guide our episodes and make everybody knowledgeable about the funeral business.
The goal of the Repast Podcast is to educate you, our listeners and viewers. We want to be able to provide you with as much information as possible without you feeling uncomfortable about asking a funeral director those questions that you may have. So any question that you have about death care, of the funeral process, whatever has to do about our industry, please leave a comment on the platform you're listening to or watching us on. We'll be sure to monitor those comments and answer those questions in future episodes. Also, if you have any ideas of future episodes or future topics that you want us to address, please also leave that in the comments.
And as we said at the beginning of the episode, joining us today as well is Miss India Ramsey, licensed funeral director at James Cole Funeral Home. Welcome to the podcast, India. Now, India, one of the most asked questions from the audience is, what exactly is it that a funeral director does?
So a funeral director does everything that is involved with the care and arrangements of funeral service, from the onset of the passing all the way to the final disposition and everything in between. And there's a lot that goes in between. So I joke about it sometimes, and I say, we're like, I'm a funeral director, but I'm also like an event planner, because there's so many things that you do with one single family, from the time of the passing to the final disposition. So from the first call, getting those details that are necessary, once a passing occurs, to making the removal, bringing their loved one into our care, arranging the appointment for the family to come in and actually talk about and sort through those details for the funeral service, the care of the deceased from the time they arrive to the funeral home, and making sure, that all those steps are properly and carefully intact until they get to the place of final disposition. And then, oftentimes I get asked questions about, other things that may not be in our realm. Like, hey, do you know any repast places? Do you know a caterer? Do you know somebody does balloons? So, it's everything in between. So we take care of it all.
And now touch on that and expand on that a little bit more about what it's everything in between, and it's everything that we do, but also why is it that you do this? What made you say, this is what I want to do?
Well, so going back to when I was a little girl, my grandfather was a mortician as well. My great-grandfather was a mortician. And so I was always around it. I remember getting picked up in a family car from middle school and going back to the funeral home and cleaning up and straightening up. So I was always around it. So it was always like a second nature thing for me. But they didn't push it on me. Like my father, my grandfather, they didn't push it on me. It's just something that I was around, and I admired it. Like I admired the respect that they got. I admired just what they did and how they took care of people. And I'm like, I want to do that. I could see myself doing that. So even now, taking care of people from the time they make that call to us, letting us know that a passing has occurred, and they have no idea where, and they will say that, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where to start. I need you guys to just, a passing occurred. What happens now? And you have to take them through that step by step. And so once you get them to the end, of that arrangement, or the end, at the cemetery, it's gratifying to know that you were able to take care of them in that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, and on that, with that gratification that you've done your job well and you've made sure the family was taken care of, I want to shoot this question to my mother. What do you feel makes a good funeral director?
Oh, just having compassion for people, listening to people. I think half of the job is about listening. I had a family a couple weeks ago, and we were in the office over an hour. And I think we talked about the funeral and planning it for 15 minutes maybe. The rest of the time was them just talking about the deceased, telling me about their last few days and the last weeks, and sharing all this information about the deceased with me. And basically I was just listening to them. And like I said, of that whole time we were together, only 15 minutes of it was actually planning the funeral. So much of it has to do with just loving people. That's one thing my father did. He loved people, and I'm the same way. I can sit there with people all day and just talk to them. So that's one of the main things about being a good funeral director is being empathetic with people and understanding them.
Right. And that's what I love about our family-owned funeral home. This is not a place where you come and you get rushed out the door. This is not a place where you come and do your shopping and get out. Right. This is not one of those places at all. And being the family funeral home that we are, we're able to say, sit down, let's talk about this. And then you can stay there for, like you said, an hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it takes to get it done and make sure the family's comfortable and at ease. And that's what we do.
People don't go through this every day, thank God. And they're looking for guidance. They want you to just take hold of it and just guide them every step of the way. And that's what our job is.
And you're almost acting as a pseudo therapist, because that talking is their healing. That share, even if it's something that they seem upset about, most times it's not they're upset at you or the funeral, but they're upset about the situation. and just letting them talk through whatever it is part of a healing for them.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, then you can almost feel the weight lifted off. And once they get it off their chest, whatever it is, whether it's a problem with a family member, whether it's something that the deceased didn't do the right way before they left us, but just whatever it is, just listening to them and let them get it off their chest. And it's not really much that you have to contribute, but just that listening piece.
Right.
And, contribute where you can. If they're asking questions, you just encourage them to keep talking through it until they're done.
That's right.
And Antonio, that's that encouragement and that backbone and support that we offer that I know it's happened to you, with many arrangements as we've done, me and you together. But when you are done with that funeral arrangement and you tell the family, okay, we're all set. If you have any questions, let me know. And that family looks at you and says, you made this so easy. Thank you so much. That's that gratification, then job well done. That's how we kind of, get our reassurance that we're still on the right track and we're doing the correct job. Exactly.
Energy to do it another day.
Right. It keeps you going for that other day, unless okay, I'm doing the right thing and we're here to help. Exactly.
Especially when they say, I was somewhere else not too long ago and I didn't get this same service.
We're not going to talk about that, right? I don't believe that's this episode. But yeah, I understand. And that's what sets us apart too. And that's what we thrive for as well. Not only to provide the best service, but to set us apart so that everybody knows no matter what, if you come to James Cole, you're going to get all your questions answered. Right. You're going to get treated respectfully. And you're going to be at a position where once you're done and you leave, there's nothing else to do, except for, okay, they even gave me a checklist on what I need to do next. Let me take this home with me. Yeah. And that's that, just like while we're here on the podcast, we're answering those questions, making sure all those questions are answered.
Mm-hmm. Another audience question that we received is about when a call comes into the funeral home or when the death has occurred, what happens behind the scenes? Or what's the next steps that we take? Because so often when the families, they make that phone call to us, as far as they're concerned, they just show up at the funeral home and make the arrangements, and then they don't come back until it's time for a viewing or for the service. So there's a lot that happens from, that from the beginning until they do the viewing or come to the service. So what do you think, India? What would you say are some of those key things that happen in the midst, in that background, from the time that we get the phone call or we call the death call?
Well, there's a lot of paperwork and phone calls that happen on our end that the family, they don't see. But after we get that initial phone call, our minds go to making that removal, making sure all the proper paperwork is in place so that we can bring your loved one here into our care, so we can properly start caring for them for the services. So that's the next step to the service on our end. And then once your loved one is, at the funeral home, then we start the process of, if you are going to have a funeral or visitation, then we have to start the preparation in our care center to make sure that that's possible. And then we give you a call so that you can come in and make the arrangements. And so at that time, you sit down with the funeral director and you're discussing all of your ideas, everything that you want to take place between that point and the actual service. So, but there's definitely a lot of paperwork, a lot of phone calls, a lot of planning on our end. And they, thankfully the family is able to just see that end result when they come in to view their loved one.
Then one big thing that we always get calls on is the death certificate. When are the death certificates going to be ready?
I've had families ask me when they come in for the arrangements, do you have the death certificates? And I'm like, I didn't get the information from you yet.
So go over that, hit on that. What do you need to create a death certificate, or why isn't it ready when the family comes in to make the arrangements? So what's that process?
So we don't collect the death certificate information until we actually sit down with the family. And so that's the vital information about the deceased. So, all their history, their maiden name and education, social security number, place of birth, all of those things. And so, like I said, we don't collect that until we actually sit down with the family. And then it has to be signed by the physician with a cause of passing, and then it has to be certified. So that in itself is a process. So when you come down and sit with the funeral director, we don't have the death certificate ready for you at that time.
And that's one of those big items that, like you said, that Antonio said, that's that big item of well, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? No, it's not. And that's why we tell people when they come in, you have to make sure you bring all that information with you. We try to prep you on the phone. We try to prep you and let you know, bring your loved one's social security number. Make sure you have their correct date of birth. Make sure you have the correct spelling of their father's name as well as their mother's name at birth. That's always, it seems to be the tricky question, and always a question that trips people up is when you say, okay, now what was your loved one's mother's first name? Got it, no problem. Now what was her last name at birth? Let me call somebody. Right. Then it turns into, well, I've got to call my aunt. I've got to call my uncle. I got to call my cousin. I got to call this person. And that always, it's almost like doing a genealogy tree. And if you're not ready for it, you got to start making phone calls. But those are those particular information that we have to have.
Another thing with death certificates, time-wise, only half of it is on the funeral home. So it's important for people to remember that we're only doing half the job. The big part is the doctor. Is the signing physician.
Yes.
They have to sign the death certificate, list the cause of passing, and get that back to us so we can file it.
Yes. And I make sure I explain that that could take a day. It could take a week if they're on vacation. It's all in the doctor's hands. So that's important for families to know, because many times they think that we've just set it aside and it's, we'll get back to it, but we're waiting on other steps to take place before we can provide that to you.
Yeah, well, people don't realize the funeral home doesn't, I don't care what our funeral home, any funeral home, they don't want to sit on the death certificate, because if there's insurance being used, that's how the funeral home gets paid. They have to submit that with the claim to the insurance company. So there's no reason for them to slow walk the death certificate. So people really have to understand when it comes to that is something the funeral home wants, not as bad as you, but close to just as bad, because we want to get that business aspect wrapped up and get them in your hands. So family planning, with making the arrangements, discussing the timing with family, what do you think, India, would be the average time that would be good timing for a funeral, from the time they're making the arrangements until the day of the service? What would be an average time that people should plan for to have the service?
So typically what I see is that within 7 to 10 days is about average that we see someone wants to have a service from the time they come in to make the arrangements to the actual day of the service. It's about 7 to 10 days. That's about average. I mean, sometimes, of course, it goes longer than that. They're waiting on family to come in from out of town, or still just trying to sort out business. It may take a little longer, but on average, I would say about 7 to 10 days, typically.
And then clothing, what kind of clothing do you typically need? Because families always ask, well, do they need shoes or do they need underwear?
I get that all the time. So we provide a very detailed checklist of all the items that we need, and we dress from head to toe. So we want undergarments, we want all the way down to the shoes. And you don't have to have shoes, but at least socks or stockings or knee highs, whatever your loved one preferred. But we like to dress in every layer of clothing. We just like to offer that dignity and respect to the deceased. Now, I have had families say in the arrangements, when I get to that part of the arrangement process, and I say, okay, so we have to have undergarments, a slip if they wore a slip, nylons, and they say, undergarments? She didn't wear undergarments when she was living. I don't have any undergarments. Well, we prefer you to bring in undergarments. So we run into that often.
As I say, everybody needs their drawers.
And then that's what families do have to, that's another question and something we can answer immediately here in this podcast, is that everybody does not have shoes unless it's a full couch or full open casket. A lot of families don't really understand, the casket, are we going to see their feet? 9 times out of 10, a casket is going to be closed from the waist down. Right. You're not going to see anything from the waist down, and then that's one of the things that families have questions about. And they say, well, why not shoes? Why not? And that's what they have to understand.
And it's important to know that that's a regional thing too. Right. So here in Detroit, 90% of the time it's going to be a half couch casket where you just see from the waist up. Right. But a lot of times, like Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, all 90% is full couch, and that's all you're gonna see is just full couch caskets. So down south, a lot of full couch caskets. So regionally, it depends kind of what you like and what the common theme is. So a lot of times, if you have a full couch, then most times people will bring shoes because it's just automatically assumed they're going to be in a full couch. And we can if you want your loved one to have shoes, you can still use shoes. It's just not a requirement from
whatever you bring. We're gonna put it on them. Now I have had people ask me, well, if you're not gonna see from the waist down, why do they need pants?
Yeah,
I've had that oftentimes. Like I've had people bring in undergarments,
but
the
pants.
T-shirt, no pants, and we call back and say, hey, we need bottoms. What do you need bottoms for? You can't see the bottom of the casket.
Right.
Still goes back to that reverence and
Respect. Yeah. I had a family once, and the lady was from Pennsylvania, and the lady had one leg. And we were picking out the caskets and all, and so the family said, well, this is nice, but I want it open all the way. And I'm like, what? She only has one leg. And they're like, we always use full couches where I'm from, And of course, we accommodated her. We got it. Did a blanket to cover it or whatever, but they just had to have that full lid.
Yep, and there's a lot of cultural aspects within funerals and funeral services that depends on the side of the country, even with cremation. If you go on the West Coast, cremation is a lot higher than it is down south. If you go in Florida, it's a lot higher than it is up north here in Detroit. So it depends on those cultural norms on what part of the country that you're in too.
Yeah.
So India, running a funeral home, what would you say, what do families gain in trust? So how does a family select a funeral home, and how do you gain the trust of that family if it's someone who you haven't serviced before? So constantly, we're 106-year-old firm. We're burying the same families over and over and over generationally, but there are some times where people have come in and we service that we've never serviced their family before. So what do you think it takes to gain that trust of a family to have them select you?
Well, I think as a millennial myself, what I find, especially when families call for pricing, they want quality service, and what I want the most bang for my buck. Mm-hmm. So I think now more than ever, millennials they're shopping around. Yeah. I know my grandfather came here, my great grandfather came here. You guys took care of everybody in my family, but what all comes with this? What are you willing? What can you provide us for the cost? So it's all about service. They want to feel like they're the only family that you have. They want that quality care. And so that's what I find most often now with taking care of families, that they want quality service. Yeah. They want someone they can trust. When you're in that arrangement conference, you are in the midst of some very interesting conversations. You hear it all the secrets, the backstory, you hear a lot. And you're almost like a fixture in the room because you're not saying anything. You're just kind of in the midst of a table full of people who are having, conversation. But what they want to know, that builds trust there. And you're not trying to sell them something. I want to understand what it is that you want, and I'm going to offer you what you want based off of what we discussed. Mm-hmm. And it's my job as a funeral director to educate you, because many, many times they may have gone to funerals for their loved one, but this is their first time planning a funeral. So I know the gist of a funeral service, but I don't know all the intricate details from the family side. So they're looking to you to direct them and educate them, but I don't want you just selling me a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't want you to, don't sell me anything. Allow me to choose what I want based off of what you've educated me with.
And that's kind of how we built our website. If you go to jameshcole.com, we have an entire video library that's just dedicated to educating people. Yeah. What's a vault? How do you choose a vault? Why is it important? What's a casket? What types of caskets? So we have tons of videos on our website that are simply built for that, just to educate people. Yeah. Because the more you can educate someone, then when they come in to make the arrangements, they're going to be asking better, more informed questions. And then you don't have to sell them anything. You're just providing them information and answering questions because they've got that back now. So that's why I think families are so satisfied with us over the years, is because we don't have to sell them anything, because we do what we have to do to educate them even before they enter our door.
We're going to have a rapid fire, kind of I'll throw out some questions. Everybody jump in and just answer. Mom, let's start with you. One of the questions we get is, what's the busiest day at the funeral home?
Oh, there's 2 busy days. Well, Saturday is the busiest day for funerals. I mean, we'll have 12 to 14, 15 funerals on a Saturday. So that's the busiest day for funerals. I usually say Monday is the busiest day for making arrangements, because after the weekend, usually everything's shut down on Sunday. Well, everything's quiet on Sundays. We're not in the office. So Monday, you get almost 2 days worth of work. So Monday, you have a whole lot of families coming in to make arrangements. So Monday is the busiest day with arrangements, but Saturday is the busiest day for funerals.
Because you can only get to heaven if your funeral is on a Saturday.
That's right.
Right. We got a question asked that said, if you own a funeral home, that means you also own the cemetery. So you're making, you're getting me on the funeral and on the cemetery. We've had families, ask that question. And here in the state of Michigan, that's a no-no. Right. And there's no funeral home that also owns a cemetery. That's against the law. So that's why when we make our arrangements at the funeral home, we always let the family know whatever cemetery you choose is up to you. Right. And then we'll coordinate with that cemetery. But no, that can't happen. Fun fact for everybody, in Ghana, fantasy coffins are popular. They're designed to look like objects that represent the deceased life, like either a fish, a car, an airplane, a boat, and they're actually fantasy coffins. And that's a part of that's a part of what they have there. That's a part of it.
And that's just half the story. This is just part 1. We've got more behind the scenes, more laughs, and a whole lot more real talk coming in part 2 as we continue to discuss what it's like working at a funeral home and in the funeral industry. Thanks for tapping in with us for this first ride. We appreciate you more than you know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time at the Repast Podcast.